before we start, I'd just like you to think about somebody whom you know, maybe someone in your family, among your friends, or somebody in your community who has been impacted with some sort of disability. I just want you to think about it. Think about the person. Do you know anyone impacted with disability? I'm sure that somebody, right? Somebody came to your mind, and I guess that's why most of you are here, because you have a heart for people who are struggling with disability. But I just want you to mention 5 stages. Um, there are 5 stages that each one goes through when we generally think of people with disability. The first one is a stage of ignorance, actually. And many of us have been there where we really don't know what is disability. Sometimes many people wonder, is it some sort of, God doesn't really care. Maybe it's because of sin, because they don't have faith, and I don't really care. Maybe that's the first stage. The second stage is a stage where you have some sort of a pity. You look at somebody with disability, you feel a bit sorry for them, and you wonder, is there something that I can do for them? But you're not really sure about it. The third stage is a stage of care where you realize, okay, people with disability are also created in the image of God. And if you know somebody who is helping them, and you think to yourself, maybe even I can help alongside them, I can care for them in some way. The fourth is what stage is called a stage of friendship, where you actually get to be a friend of a person who has disability. And a kind of a deep sense of bond develops between both of you, and you think, okay, I'm going to be a blessing, but the other person is also a blessing to me. Let me share, because I have my daughter right here, and she had a friend from the age of 5. Her name is Rachel, and she's no longer here. She's gone to Australia. But she was Susie's very good friend. I don't know how, but they just clicked. And she's much older than Susie, but they loved each other so much. I'll tell you something that Rachel did. One day, because Susie can't speak, we didn't even know this until much later. She actually went to college, and for one whole day, she did not speak to anyone. And the reason was she wanted to know, what does it feel for Susie to not be able to express herself? Because Susie understands everything, she can comprehend a lot, but she's not able to communicate. So she actually did that. So, that stage of friendship. But actually the best stage is the stage 5, where we actually look at people with disabilities and we think, I could be a co-laborer with so-and-so. They are also made in the image of God. Maybe they're not physically able, they're not able to do all that I'm able to do, but I can work alongside of them, and I can do a lot along with them. And I think that's where the Lord wants all of us to be, actually, not just friends, but where in the church, people with disability also become co-laborers with us. Now, I also want to add a spiritual perspective of this. Let me tell you this. When we had our child, one of the questions that came to my mind was, Lord, why did this happen to us? And I'm sure that many of you, when you look at a person with disability, a child with disability, or a family who has a child with disability, sometimes the thought will come, actually, what is wrong? Is there something wrong? Mike and I used to do a lot of ministry among kids, and once we were addressing children, and we made a kind of a clay model of a little boy, and we took off, he had no limbs, he had no one hand. And then we asked the children, who do you think created this particular boy? And you know what they said? We were a bit shocked. They said, the devil. So, you may not believe it, but a lot of people think that, God cannot and He will not create something that has any sort of defect, right? So, disability cannot be from God. But as I struggled with this in my own personal life, there's a beautiful passage of scripture in Exodus chapter 4, verses 10 and 11. You know, Moses was arguing with God. God told Moses, you have to go, you have to talk to Pharaoh. And by that time, Moses was in the wilderness. He'd forgotten who he was, he'd forgotten to speak, and he's just been with sheep. And the Lord said, no, you have to go. And look at his response. Moses said, oh my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. And then the Lord said to him, who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? The first thing we must remember is that every person with disability is made in the image of God, created by God himself. And if we can just believe and know that, you know, suddenly when you look at a person with disability, we no longer look at them for what weaknesses they have, but we look at them for who they really are on the inside. And the second thing was, this is another common one, you know. Maybe the parents did something really bad. They were sinful, and so that's why God punished them with this child. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's quite prevalent. And this is also something we grappled with because Mike and I, both of us, we committed ourselves to the Lord when we were very young. We've been serving the Lord for many long years. And I really had this question, Lord, are you punishing us for something? Or is it some sort of a curse? You know, this is something that we actually grappled with. And I'm sure that many of you have questions like that. Beautiful passage of scripture in John chapter 9. And look at this, because the question that was asked was not asked by anybody else, but by the disciples of Jesus. In John chapter 9, verses 1 and 2, it says, as he passed by Jesus, he saw a man born blind from birth, and his disciples said, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. What a beautiful thing Jesus said. His own disciples who were with him, who knew that Jesus could heal any disability, you know. Jesus was the one who did it, right? He made the blind see, he made the lame walk, he even raised the dead. But his disciples had this question, Lord, who sinned? And Jesus said, and you know, think about it, is there anybody in this world who can say, I have not sinned? Is there anyone who can say, all have sinned and fallen short of God's glory, which means that if we are being treated, you know, according to our sins, every one of us must have a child with disability, right? But that's not the case. God has given people here in this world with disability for his glory. And you know, these two things that God spoke to us as a family has really changed our perspective about people with disabilities and about accepting people with disabilities. Let me briefly share with you my story. It's our personal story. My husband Michael and I are here. The year 1998, actually, when we were expecting our first child, we lost our first baby at 6.5 months, and he was stillborn. So when we were expecting Susie the next year in 99, lot of prayer had gone into it, and the doctor was extremely cautious because of what happened previously. But in spite of everything, I had developed some sort of a complication called preeclampsia, and then Susie was born extremely prematurely. She was born in 7.5 months. She only weighed 1.4 kilograms at birth. And when we brought her home, she was 1 kilogram. But the doctor said that since the baby had the birth cry, everything would be normal and everything would be fine. But that was not so. When Susie was growing up and she was like 6 or 7 or 8 months, we realized that something was not really right. And then we found out, the doctor told us that when children are born prematurely, sometimes it affects their nerves. Their nerves are not fully developed. So which means that some different parts of their body are also affected. They're like things we take for granted, Like I can walk well, I can pick up, I can pick up something with my fingers, I can eat on my own, I can chew, I can swallow, I can see. Everything became challenging. And as we, as Mike and I, it's like nobody is prepared for this, right? Nobody is prepared for this. So there began this big journey for us where every little thing from, her head control to her sitting up to her walking to everything, we had to run from here and there to all sorts of therapists. And, sometimes you'll have people who are extremely negative and say, no, your child won't do this. Your child won't be able to do that. But we always spoke in faith and said, doesn't matter what you say, but we believe in a God who says that she will do it. She will walk. Her head control will come. And the Lord did that. But in all the process, what happened was Susie also was not able to speak. Until today, she's not able to speak. But she can understand everything we are saying. She can comprehend everything, but she cannot speak, but she'll sign a lot. So as we, journey through this, she's going to be 24 years old in just a few days, but let me tell you, it's not been an easy journey for us. It's been extremely difficult because both of us were in ministry. We were very, very busy, and at the same time, we had her growing up with so many difficulties that we were not able to, every time something new would turn up, and we don't know how to handle it. But through it all, the Lord has been gracious to both of us, and He's helped us. And even till now, challenges have only become more. It's not that it's become less. I can't say that because it's really become more. She doesn't walk on her own as she used to. She fell a few times, and then she's become extremely scared to walk on her own. And it's been quite challenging for us. But let me tell you, I really mean it when I say that God gave us a precious gift in this child. I really don't, I can't even explain to you how much she loves the Lord. The way she worships God, the way she understands God, the way she cares for somebody's emotion. Yesterday we went to visit someone. They had lost their husband, and she just could understand, and she went to that auntie and she just gave her a hug because she could sense that she was sad. Don't ask me how it happens, but the emotional part of it is so deep. And we as parents have really understood this and value the gift that God has given to us. Is it easy? It's not easy. It's extremely difficult. But the Lord has helped us. And I want to say that in a family, it's very, very important that both mother and father, both husband and wife should be, united in bringing up a child with needs. But this is not the case in many places. Like God blessed me with Mike, who is, I think, a very loving father to Susie, and it's because of his support as well. I think we've really been able to tide through everything and able to still minister for the Lord. So I think every time I watch this video, can't help but cry because I think that's what God wants every parent to be. To have a heart like He has, to love the children like He loves them. And let me just share with you some of the challenges that families who have children with disabilities or anybody who is disabled in the family, what happens to those families? The first thing that happens is, when a baby is born and then the parents discover that there's any sort of a disability, it's like an unexpected arrival. It's not like anybody is no parent is fully equipped or nobody is prepared to receive this. So, the first thing is a sense of, many people don't want to even accept it actually. They live in a kind of a denial. They want to believe that everything is good and nothing is really wrong with their child. But the fact is that, as time goes by, they'll have to accept this. So that's the first thing. And there are families where there are more than one child who has a disability. Like we met a family in a place called Kovalam near Chennai, and it so happened that we chanced upon meeting them, and we found out that both the children were born with a disease called brittle bone disease, where the bones keep breaking. And the amount of pressure that is there on a mother and father when they have 2 children. And there was another neighbor who had 3 boys, and all the 3 boys were born well, and later they developed muscular dystrophy. So, that was also a challenge because they lost 2 children. The older boy was doing his 12th. He did so well, but even before the results came, he passed away. So when we meet people like this, who have more than they can handle, and we may not even know unless you go and actually meet them, or by chance you get to know that they're going through something, then we're able to understand a little bit of what people are going through. Another thing is, find that many people, their families, going normally, suddenly a child with disability is born and their whole schedule goes topsy-turvy. They have to suddenly rearrange all of their life because they have to fit in to a totally new schedule. And sometimes this process is long and it's like lifelong. I don't know if you'll be able to understand this. Like we usually have, when babies are born into a family, like by the time they are 3 or 4, they're in school and they're able to do a lot of things on their own. But if there is a child with disability, sometimes the child is not even able to feed themselves, or not able to do a lot of things. And then this goes on like, all through their life. So for the family, what happens is, this becomes a lifelong process. Recently, we were in Ooty, and Mike was filling petrol in the car, and there was a boy who was filling, and then he saw Susie, and then he came and spoke to him, and he said, I have a brother at home, and he also has a disability, but he can't do anything. And so Mike asked him, so how is your mother? He said, she couldn't handle it. After a while, she's just lost her mind. She can't even handle the pressure of what's happening. So there are lots of people like this who will maybe open up if they know that we really care. So, and then there's a thing that happens is sometimes in society, especially I think in our country, there's always a strange look people give if they see anyone with disability, right? There's always the second look, and they'll turn around, and sometimes they'll laugh at the child or make fun of the child because they can't walk or they're not talking properly. And what happens is families go through so much. After a point, they feel, I can't handle this, so I just don't want to mingle with society. I'll just be secluded. And that's why most of the time you never see children with disability anywhere outside in society. And then there is the whole stress, financial stress. There's the physical stress, and it takes its toll on the family. Really, if it's not for the fact that the Lord is with us and the Lord strengthens us, I don't think even Mike and I can handle many of the things that we go through. But it's really the grace of God, that He helps us at times when things are really hard and things are really tough. The Lord really strengthens us, and we find our strength in Him. And also, there's a lack of support generally in our society, except maybe the immediate family might give some sort of support. But in general, there is no support at all for anybody, any family who has a person with disability. And also, it's a lonely journey. Let me tell you, it's very, very tough. It's very lonely because everybody else has children who are normal, who are doing the normal things, and it seems all okay. But suddenly you have a family who is stuck with a child who has disability, who doesn't know how to handle it, and it's a lonely journey. And the very sad part, let me tell you, sometimes people think that because you have a child with disability, they treat you that way. They think that the parents, something's wrong with the parents, and they kind of exclude them. And I think that's one of the most painful things that can happen. And most of these, actually, Mike and I have gone through it as a family. We've gone through and we've overcome many of these things by the grace of God. And so these are some of the challenges that I want to place. Let me very quickly share with you a little statistics that will help us as a church to think about something. One of the things is that most churches, most disabled people don't come to church because most churches are not disabled friendly. So like, for example, if a person is on a wheelchair, or a person can't hear, or a person is blind, if they come to church, there's nothing much they can do. So when a church is not equipped to actually welcome people with disabilities. The other thing is, sometimes, when children or people with disabilities come, they don't do the normal things. Okay, for example, we have a fellowship in Chennai, and my daughter, she cannot sing, but she will make very loud noise when you're singing, okay? Because she knows all the songs and she wants to sing, but somehow the people in our fellowship have become so much used to Susie, they don't even care. They know that she will laugh, she will clap, she will make a big noise, but it's not the case when you go to a very traditional or, a church where suddenly your child makes a big loud noise or claps and everybody turns around and they're like, oh my gosh, everybody's looking at her now and everybody's looking at us. But that's the thing, so many people don't feel welcome to church. And also the thing is, there is a big percentage of people who are not reached, almost 80 to 85% worldwide, who have children with disabilities are not reached with the gospel of Jesus. Many of them don't come to church because they don't feel welcome in church, they don't feel included. And one more thing is, almost 80 to 85% of husband and wife, like, they separate if they have a child with disability or if they have anyone who has some sort of is in a disabled condition. And this is really sad because I think especially in India, what people are doing is, the man feels that this is not my responsibility, and he kind of leaves and goes. So what happens, the entire responsibility falls on the woman who doesn't really have the strength to handle it. So this is what is the situation that's happening. So why we are presenting all these things today to the church is for us to think about how can we as a church be those who can actually include people with disabilities into our fellowships.
Thank you. Thank you, Esther and Mike, for sharing your beautiful journey. Thank you, Susie, for being with us here. Wow. This just one verse comes to my mind when I was listening to. Jesus said, go and preach the good news to all creation. I'm sorry for getting emotional. But we never think of families who have these children and somehow they're neglected. They are put aside and not even thought of. We are like out of sight, out of mind. So I never thought that I would get an opportunity to study special education. Never in my wildest dreams I thought that I would get into this field, But for some reason I thought, God is asking me to join this course to learn about this world and what what we can learn from them. So I just wanted to briefly tell you about what a disability is. According to the PW Act, which was formed by the government in 1995 in India, it's for the right of persons with disabilities. And disability means, there can be various forms of disabilities which can be seen, which cannot be seen, which is tangible, which is clear to eyes, which we can't see. It's an impairment. It's an impairment with long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairment, which act as a barriers for them to interact, to communicate. It hinders their full and effective participation in society. Like how we can participate, they are not able to participate because they have these impairments. The persons with disability have a huge effect on this experience of participation and being one with the society because of the disability they have, the impairment they have. And mostly, I feel more than that, it's the inaccessible environment creates barriers that often hinders the full and effective participation of them. It's the environmental barriers, it's the attitude of the society, the community. It creates more disability in them. How we can tackle this disability is by removing these barriers that's hindering this disability. So the statistics shows that about 1 billion individuals face some form of disability, and 20% have severe functional limits. It's called functional limitations. Like Esther was sharing that we take few things for granted. You know, people with these impairments have day-to-day functional limitations. Since 80% of those with disabilities live in developing nations, it is essential to ensure the inclusion in all aspects of development. So this act came about in America first, where they started to fight for the rights of disabled children and people. They say that in 2001, there are 2.9 crore people with disability in India alone, who constitute 2.13% of the total population. This includes visual, hearing, speech, locomotor, and mental disabilities. 75% of persons with disabilities live in rural areas where they don't have even the basic amenities or facilities like transport. They can't get into a bus because it's not environmental friendly for the disabled children or people. Basic functional day-to-day activities is limited because we don't have facilities. 49% of disabled population is literate and only 34% are employed. The overall prevalence of disability in India is 4.5. I'm sure these statistics are very low compared to the actual people who are living in India alone. And there are various types of disabilities. There's detail we don't want to get into, but some which you can see, like the child might seem normal to you, but he would have autism. Autism is, the processing, they're not able to communicate or interact immediately, or you get a natural response from the child, you might not get from an autistic child. And you might not even know about that. And there's deaf blindness. They can't hear and they can't see. And there's developmental delay. Here you might see the delays in the developmental milestones, like 6 months the child starts crawling, sitting up, they'll have delay. So all the activities and the day-to-day functional gets delayed. Emotional disturbances, these disabilities can further impair their other emotional, and because they're frustrated, they're not able to do like the other kids do. They see the other kids who can, do other things, and they feel, it's frustrating because they can't communicate, they can't, and most of the time we don't have, we don't hear them out, so they feel neglected. So that's how they get these emotional disturbances. Hearing impairment, mental retardation. They are born with mental retardations, and this is various forms. I mean, they're mild to severe. And some are born with multiple disabilities. They have, like, they are deaf, they're blind, and they're mute, they don't have limbs, so they have multiple disabilities. Orthopedic impairment is you might have an accident or you're born without a limb, or, so that's the impairment. And Specific learning disability is one thing where we see a lot of children these days in schools. I mean, they were able to recognize them. They are very slow in their learning. They don't, dyslexia. They don't see numbers like we do. They don't see alphabets like we read. So there's a method and, technique involved in how we teach them. Speech and language impairment, you all know. Traumatic brain injury, you meet with an accident and you have brain hemorrhage. So there's so many kind of disabilities we have. So as a special educator, before this, my view or perspective was we can't do much, you know. Uh, it's just like Esther said, we really can't be of any help to these kids or to these families because what we can do, we don't know anything. But after I joined the course and I interacted with the kids and with the teachers, I learned that there's so much we can do and we can be part of their journey in their day-to-day life, or come up with solutions or practical things. And these children are so pure and innocent and they would love you well, and there's so much to learn from them. Actually, we think we are helping them, but actually they help you grow, as a person. They have no jealousy, no competition, and they're just so uh, full of love, and they're so selfless in their giving. So I feel that um, these are the 4 things. Can you change the slide to, yeah. So these are the 4 things that I feel we lack in our community. Awareness. Many of us, like me, before I went to this course, I had absolutely no idea about this. So that I think awareness is very, very important. We can take time to know about the disabilities. We can Google. We have videos, and we have a national institute in Hyderabad. This is one of the 5 national mental health institutions of India is in Hyderabad. And most of us are not aware of that. We can go take a trip to that place and just, meet people and see the children and get to know more about it if you have a burden for disability. And training. How can we as church train? I mean, we can't do the special education courses, but if you feel a burden or a need to help in this area, maybe we can just get to know. We can have a little bit of, understanding and awareness, and how we can help. We can also make our children aware of this. How many of our children are comfortable with other children like this? How many of our children are exposed to something like this? So we can start doing that, make our children aware of this and train them and include them so that they grow up with this as a norm. Inclusion. One of the PWD acts in India is all about inclusiveness, and most of us and most of the schools are not even aware of this right. Every special need child has a right to study in a normal school. But are our schools equipped with the infrastructure? Are our hospitals and our churches and the restaurants are friendly, disabled friendly? We need to create this awareness. We need to be intentional. Most of you must be architects. You can create this awareness when you're doing a building design. You can give them ideas, for the ramps and big, huge doors so that, the wheelchairs can pass. So wherever, no matter which field you are in, you can create awareness of disability. Who are the stakeholders for the disability world? Families, churches, therapists, and our community, the government. So wherever we are, we can voice out for them. So I actually had a conversation with Esther, and I learned this, that there's so much that we can learn from a special child. Come and share.
Yeah, generally we think, when we used to teach we used to go for once a week to Susie's school and teach children there. And we used to go thinking we are teaching them something. But you will not believe, every time we went, we learned something from them. Simple lesson on values, Mike was asking them, what do you value? He had various things. And then he said, would you value a car key or would you value a keyboard? And guess what? What would you say? There's a car key. Somebody wants to give you a car key or a keyboard. Which one would you like? Which one? Car key, right? But they said the keyboard. And he said, why? He said, because you can play music and all of us can sing. So you see, their values are completely different. For example, when you're talking to Susie, where do you want to go? Like, you can tell her the best of places. You can tell her the best mode of transportation. She doesn't care. Who will be there? Who are we going to meet? Who am I going to see? That's all she cares about. She doesn't care about you can go by plane, train, bus, car, you can walk, doesn't matter. But where we are going is not the problem. She wants to know who are we meeting. So, when you look at children actually with disability, there's something so precious about them. And Vandana said, they're so innocent. Maybe something so precious inside of them that is not tarnished because of whatever they're not able to do. God has given them this precious soul inside of them. And we used to have a little Bible study on the book of Romans, and a lot of young people used to come and participate at home. And we were doing about, Adam's fall and all that. And after it was over, one of the young boys came to Mike and said, Mike, I have a question. Do you think Adam and Eve would have been like Susie before the fall? And we really thought about it because not that, Susie's not the best of behavior all the time. Sometimes she can be really angry. But in general, if you look at her, she has no bias. She loves everybody. It could be anybody on the street also. She'll just look at them and say, you're looking very nice, super dress. And that person, doesn't matter who it is, they just feel loved. She does not care. She does not think rich, poor, educated, uneducated, guy, girl, doesn't matter. There's no difference. She loves everybody. And I think that's what people with needs and people who are disabled do. They love everybody. And their love for God is very pure. Do you know that nobody can, I think, sometimes Mike and I, we just sit and we watch her. She's got her tab and there's music playing and she's sometimes kneeling, her hands lifted up. And, it's like amazing because I don't think it's so spontaneous. There's no audience, there's nobody to impress, but she's just worshiping the Lord. And I think that's something so beautiful that children with needs can do. And they can actually teach our normal children, Sometimes our children have everything. Our children are growing up in our homes, they have everything, but they're not able to love God. They're not able to love people. They're not able to accept people. But this is what children and people with disability bring into our churches, actually. If only we let them come in and if we let them be part of all that we are doing. There's so much that we can learn from them. They laugh at nobody, but people laugh at them, right? If a child walks a little differently, speaks a little differently, says the wrong thing or is a little bit hyperactive, people tend to laugh at them. I was talking to a lady whose son was autistic and she goes through so much. So sometimes she calls and she used to talk to me. And she said, I went to a program and because my son is so hyperactive, I just thought I'll go way behind because I didn't want to disturb anyone. I went way behind and I was standing there and he was still so hyperactive and he was so excited. And she said, somebody came and said, can you keep him quiet? And she said, I was so hurt because I was actually going far away from the crowd because I didn't want to disturb. And, sometimes people are not aware of what these children and people are going through. And let me tell you, more than the child, it's the parents who are going through a lot. You may not even understand that. I don't know how to explain it. It's like, I'll tell you, as a young person, don't ask me why. I had this heart to work with children with disability. So actually, in my year between my graduation and before I went to Bible college, I had a year's gap. And I actually went and served in a school for children with disabilities for almost 6 months. And as I watched those children, I was very young, and I saw a child struggling to button her shirt. I saw her struggling to eat. And I told God, Lord, this is too much. I really told God that, Lord, it's too much, Lord. I can't handle this really. I find it so hard to watch these children struggle this way. But do you know that I did not know that God would actually give me a child, give us a child with needs. And now there's no way I can escape. There's no way I can run away from it. But the Lord has taught us so much because of what we've gone through. God has helped us to understand what people go through, what parents are going through. And one of the things, Vandana and I have been talking a lot about this, and that's what we are trying to see. What can we as a church do, and what difference can we make to this group of people who are generally being neglected in society? What can we do? And how can we support these families? How can we help these families? This is what we were talking about. And Vandana had made a lot of observations, actually. I don't know whether you would want to share some of those things that you have seen, right?
So while I was doing my course and I have the privilege to meet most of these children, so we've realized that they have a lot of potential and gifts in them that we oversee, or we think that they're not, they can't do it. So I feel that if we train them enough and they have proper guidance, and at the right time we take a right decision to put them in schools and they are not neglected, they can be real gifts to our community. I would like to give an example of Nicholas James, who is an Australian American Christian evangelist, and he's a motivational speaker. You must have all seen him and heard him. And he was born with the tetraamelia syndrome, where he was born without the limbs. And I want to tell you, there's nothing that he can't do. He can do absolutely anything because his parents believed in him and taught him to see the bright side of life and encouraged him. And he said in one of his interviews that my parents put me in a normal school, and so I really believe that the kids need to be included in a normal society for us to see the gifts and talents and for us to benefit from their gifts and talents. We are missing out, actually, not them. We are missing out on a lot of things.